Far away in the endless black of space, a group of alien explorers moved slowly between the silent stars. Their ship, long and silver, carried them on missions of discovery and conquest. They were proud, intelligent beings, trained to study unknown objects and bring knowledge back to their empire. For many years they had scanned worlds, ships, and strange signals. Nothing had ever surprised them. Nothing had ever frightened them. But this night in space was different. On their scanners appeared something huge, something far larger than any ship they had ever seen. It floated quietly in the dark, motionless, like a giant beast sleeping in the deep ocean. The crew gathered around the glowing screen. Their eyes widened at the sight. The captain frowned and whispered that it must be a warship. The others laughed. Who would build such a monster and then leave it drifting? They thought it must be old, maybe broken, maybe abandoned long ago. Some even said it was just empty metal, nothing more. But the size of it was undeniable. It was shaped like a dagger, sharp and deadly, with endless rows of weapon ports along its sides. Even in silence, it looked dangerous. The captain gave the order. "Prepare the scanners. Let's see what this relic is hiding." The aliens began their work. Their machines hummed, sending invisible waves toward the sleeping giant. On their screens, lines of data began to appear. At first, it seemed normal. Metal structure, heavy armor, old engines. They were excited, hoping to learn secrets from this lost ship. They dreamed of bringing this knowledge back to their empire and gaining honor. But then the first anomaly appeared. The sensors detected strange energy patterns, like a heartbeat hidden deep inside the warship. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered that it must be a mistake, a glitch in the system. Another said maybe some power cells were still active. The captain ordered them to scan deeper. The machines obeyed. Suddenly, more strange signals came. Heat signatures, movement, power surges. Something inside was not dead. Something inside was waking. The room grew tense. The humming of the scanners grew louder, like they were disturbing a sleeping giant. One of the younger crew members leaned close to the screen and whispered, "What if this ship is alive?" The others shivered at the thought. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Only the sound of the machines filled the silence. Then, without warning, the alien ship shook. Alarms screamed. The scanners were being blocked. The warship was resisting them. On the main screen, an image appeared. Faint, blurry, but terrifying. A single human eye stared back at them. Cold, unblinking, watching. The crew gasped in horror. Some stumbled back from their stations. The captain slammed his fist against the console, shouting that it must be a trick. But in his heart, even he felt fear. That eye looked real. It looked alive. The ship they were scanning was not empty. It was aware. It was awake. The crew tried to shut down the scanners, but the machines would not stop. The warship had taken control. The lights in the alien ship flickered. Power drained away as if something was feeding on their energy. The massive human warship glowed faintly, like a sleeping beast opening one eye. A single red light appeared on its hull, blinking slowly, as if it were breathing. The aliens froze. They could feel it watching them, studying them, judging them. For the first time in their lives, they felt small. The captain tried to sound brave. He ordered the crew to prepare weapons, but his voice shook. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to anger the giant that now stared at them from the dark. The scanners continued to feed data, but the numbers made no sense. Energy levels were rising far beyond anything they had ever recorded. The structure of the warship seemed impossible, as if it was both machine and something more. The youngest alien whispered again, "This is no ship. This is a ghost." At that moment, the human warship shifted. Not much, just a small movement, but enough to show that it was alive. Its massive cannons turned slightly, pointing into the black void. The aliens held their breath. Their scanners began to shake violently. The data screens blurred. Then everything went dark. For a long time, there was nothing. No sound. No light. Only silence. The crew sat frozen, hearts pounding, unable to move. Then slowly, one light returned on their screen. It was the human warship again, glowing faintly, staring at them with its cold, unblinking eye. And then a message appeared, written in their language, though they had never taught it. Only 3 words. 3 words that froze their blood and filled their hearts with terror. Do not scan. The crew stared at the message, unable to breathe. The captain tried to speak, but no words came. Their hands shook. Their minds screamed. The silence of space felt heavier than ever. They had wanted to study a relic, an old machine, a forgotten ship. Instead, they had awakened something far beyond their understanding. Something that should never have been touched. Something human. The alien crew sat frozen in silence, their eyes locked on the message that glowed across their screens. The words, "Do not scan," burning in their minds like fire. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly, as if even the smallest sound might awaken the monstrous warship completely. The captain clenched his jaw, his eyes narrow with fear and pride, unwilling to let terror rule over his command. He barked an order to shut down the scanners, but the machines refused to obey, locked in some unseen grip of the warship's control. The younger officers worked frantically, their fingers flying across the consoles, but every system they touched only gave the same response. Error, locked, denied. It was as if the alien ship no longer belonged to them. Panic rippled across the crew, some muttering that they should flee, others whispering that they were cursed the moment they dared to look at the giant vessel. The captain silenced them. With a roar, trying to keep order, but inside his heart pounded like a drum of war. His training told him this should be impossible. No relic ship should be able to hack into their systems. No ghost ship should be able to fight back. Yet here it was, alive and aware. Then something changed on their main display. The eye that had stared at them vanished, and instead streams of strange images began to appear. At first they were blurry, static-filled, like broken memories, but slowly they became clear. The aliens leaned closer, their breath shallow as they realized what they were seeing. Battlefields. Great wars fought in the dark of space, explosions tearing across galaxies, entire fleets of ships burning, entire worlds consumed in fire. And at the heart of every battle was the human warship, the same giant vessel that now floated silently before them. They watched as countless alien races, different from their own, faced the humans in war, and one by one those empires fell. The warship was like a shadow of death, always appearing, always striking, always leaving only silence behind. The Odyssey crew stared in horror as these visions played across their screens, and though no sound came from the images, they could almost hear the screams, the destruction, the endless thunder of weapons. One officer whispered that these must be recordings stored within the ship, a kind of memory preserved for all time. But another muttered something far more terrifying, that these were not just memories, they were warnings. As if the ship was showing them what it had done and what it could do again. The youngest alien trembled and asked why the humans had built such ships, why they had filled them with such hatred and power. Nobody answered, for none of them truly wanted to know. Then the images stopped, and once again the screen went dark. For a heartbeat, the crew hoped it was over, that the warship had shown them its message and would return to silence. But then their own computers lit up with new data, streams of information pouring in at blinding speed. They recognized some of it. Blueprints, weapons designs, energy signatures. Yet much of it was incomprehensible, as if written in a language too old or too advanced for them to understand. The captain's face turned pale as he realized what was happening. The warship was letting them look, letting them glimpse its secrets, but only to terrify them further. It was a trap, a game played by a predator with its prey. He shouted for the crew to cut the connection, but their consoles sparked and hissed, refusing to obey. One by one, the lights in their control room dimmed until only the glow of the warship remained. Then something truly chilling happened. The ship itself seemed to move closer, not with engines or thrust, but as if the darkness of space had bent and carried it nearer. On its surface, more red lights began to glow, lining the edges, like the eyes of some ancient beast. The crew gasped as those lights formed a pattern, a symbol none of them recognized, but one that filled them with instinctive dread. A deep vibration rolled through their vessel, a soundless hum that rattled their bones and made their teeth ache. It felt like the warship was speaking to them, not with words, but with raw presence. The youngest alien clutched his head and cried out, claiming he could hear whispers in his mind, voices in a tongue he could not understand, but which filled him with fear. Others soon confessed they felt it too, a cold touch in their thoughts, a human shadow reaching across the void and scratching at their minds. The captain tried to stand tall, his voice steady as he ordered the crew to remain calm, but even his hands shook as he gripped the railing. He realized then that the human warship was not only a machine, not only metal and circuits, it was something more, something built to be more. It was a weapon, yes, but also a warning, a guardian, a ghost of humanity itself. It did not simply destroy fleets, it crushed hope, it spread fear like a disease. And now that same fear crawled through the hearts of every alien who dared to look at it. The scanners continued their work, though no one commanded them. They burrowed deeper into the ship's structure, pulling out fragments of information, fragments of horror. They found rooms filled with weapons, some so powerful the aliens could not even imagine their function. They saw engines designed to cross galaxies in moments, reactors that could power worlds, shields that could hold against the fury of suns. The crew shivered as they realized this ship alone could destroy their entire empire, and perhaps it already had destroyed empires they never even knew existed. Then suddenly the data cut off. Their screens went black again. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. The aliens held their breath, waiting, dreading what would come next. And then, without warning, a single red eye appeared once more, brighter than before, glowing like fire in the dark. This time it did not vanish. This time it stayed, unblinking, watching. And then came a sound, soft at first, like static in their speakers. But as it grew louder, they recognized it, a voice, a human voice, cold, deep, and filled with a power that shook their souls. It spoke only 4 words, but those words carved themselves into their hearts like knives. You are not welcome. The crew sat frozen in terror, their bodies stiff, their minds racing. They realized then that they had crossed a line they were never meant to cross. They had seen something they should never have seen. They had awakened something that should have been left in the dark. And now they knew the truth. The human warship was not simply defending itself. It was warning them. It was telling them that something far worse was still to come. The alien crew sat in silence, their faces pale and their eyes wide, as the human voice echoed through their ship, deep and powerful, saying the chilling words, "You are not welcome." The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, filled with authority, with command, with a weight that pressed against their very souls. Even after the voice faded, the silence it left behind was heavy, crushing them with fear. The captain stood frozen, his mind racing, torn between pride and terror. He wanted to believe this was a trick, some ancient defense system still active, some recording left behind by long-dead humans. But in his heart, he knew the truth. The voice was alive. It was aware. It was here, speaking directly to them. One officer whispered shakily that they should turn back, flee into the dark before it was too late. But the captain silenced him with a glare. He would not run from an empty relic, not while his crew watched. His pride would not allow it. He ordered the scanners to continue, but the machines did not respond. Instead, their own ship's systems flickered with static, lights dimming and controls failing, as if the human warship had reached its invisible hand deep into their vessel and claimed it as its own. The crew scrambled at their consoles, trying to regain control, but every attempt ended in failure. The scanners lit up again, not by their command, but by the warship's will, and new data filled the screens, this time not showing weapons or blueprints, but something far more frightening: coordinates. The aliens stared in shock as lines of numbers scrolled endlessly across the displays, star maps, locations of battles fought long ago, entire sectors of space that had been wiped clean of life. Each set of coordinates ended the same way: with silence, with destruction, with nothing left. The captain's chest tightened as he realized the warship was not simply warning them, it was teaching them. It was showing them what happened to those who ignored its warnings. One of the crew cried out that they should stop looking, that their minds could not take more, but the images kept coming, faster and faster, as if the warship was forcing them to understand its terrible history. They saw alien fleets far larger than their own, entire armadas armed with weapons beyond imagining. But each time the human warship appeared like a shadow, cutting through them with ease, leaving nothing but burning wrecks drifting in the void. They saw worlds turn to ash, cities crushed beneath fire raining from the skies, millions of lives erased in moments. And at the center of it all, always, was the human warship, moving like a predator, unstoppable, merciless, unfeeling. Sci-Fi crew began to tremble, some covering their eyes, others whispering prayers to their gods, but nothing could block the visions that poured into their minds. The youngest alien gripped his chair tightly, tears running down his face, and whispered, "We should not have come here. We should not have looked." His words were filled with terror, and yet they carried the truth that all of them now felt. The warship had given them a first warning, and they had ignored it. Now it was showing them why they should never ignore a warning from something human. Suddenly, the visions stopped. The screens went black once more, leaving the crew shaking and broken, their bodies weak as if they had been drained of strength. For a long moment there was silence, and then the red eye returned, burning on their display, unblinking, merciless. This time the voice came again, stronger, colder, and though it spoke in a language they had never known, they understood every word as clearly as if it was their own. "Leave now," it said, each syllable heavy as stone, "or share their fate." The captain's hands shook, his pride battling his fear. He wanted to prove his strength, to show his crew that he was not afraid, but deep inside he knew he was standing on the edge of doom. The warship was not threatening them. It was promising them. The crew looked at him with wide eyes, waiting for his decision, begging silently for him to order retreat. But he hesitated, caught between the duty to his empire and the primal instinct of survival. He remembered stories told in whispers among his people, old tales of humans, a race long gone, spoken of like myths, creatures of war who built machines that could outlast eternity. He had never believed them. He had thought them lies. But now, standing before this giant warship, hearing its voice, seeing its memories, he knew the stories had been true. Humans were not myths. They were nightmares given form, and their nightmares had not died. He finally opened his mouth, his voice shaking, as he gave the order to power the engines and retreat, but before his crew could obey, the alien ship shuddered violently. Their controls flickered and died, alarms blaring across the room. The warship was not letting them go. It had offered a warning, and they had not left in time. Panic spread among the crew, some shouting that they were doomed, others begging. The warship allowed for mercy, though they knew it would give none. The captain roared at his men to stay calm, but his words carried no strength, for he too was trembling with dread. The warship loomed outside their window, its red lights glowing brighter, its weapons beginning to stir like a predator stretching its claws. The crew stared in horror, their minds frozen in fear, as the first warning of the human warship echoed. Again in their thoughts, a voice that seemed to live inside their skulls, whispering the same words over and over. "Leave now! Leave now! Leave now!" But they could not leave. They were trapped, and in that moment, they realized the truth. The warning was not a chance for survival. It was a test. The warship had wanted to see what they would do, and now that they had failed, the true terror was about to begin. The alien ship drifted helplessly in the dark, caught in the invisible grip of the human warship, their controls dead, their engines powerless, their hope fading with each passing second. The crew sat pale and silent, their wide eyes fixed on the massive shadow that loomed before them, its red lights glowing like burning eyes in the void. The first warning still echoed in their minds, the voice of the warship repeating its command to leave, but they could not leave. They could not even move. Then slowly the screens in their control room flickered back to life, and what appeared next made their blood run cold. The warship was opening its mind to them again, feeding them visions and data, forcing them to see. At first they saw corridors, endless metal halls stretching within the ship. But these were not empty. They were filled with shadows, shapes that moved just out of sight. The crew leaned closer, straining to see, and then the shadows became clear. Human soldiers walked the halls, their armor black, their faces hidden, their weapons ready. The aliens gasped, some whispering in terror, for these soldiers were not alive, not truly. They moved like ghosts, their bodies flickering as if made of smoke and memory. Yet their eyes glowed with the same red fire as the warship itself. One of the crew cried out that these were recordings, echoes of the humans who had once commanded this ship. But another whispered in fear that they were not echoes. They were guardians, digital souls, pieces of human minds trapped forever inside the machine. The captain felt his skin crawl as he realized the truth. This ship was not only a weapon, it was a tomb, a prison of human ghosts, bound to serve forever. The soldiers marched in silence through the endless corridors, and as they moved, the aliens felt something strange, a pressure in their thoughts, like whispers brushing against the edges of their minds, words that were not words, voices that were not voices. They felt anger, hunger, vengeance. It was as if the ghosts inside the machine were staring at them, reaching out to touch their thoughts, to remind them of what humanity had been. The youngest. Alien shook his head violently, clutching his temples and crying out that he could hear them speaking. He could hear their rage, their endless command to fight, destroy, and conquer. Others soon joined him, their voices breaking with fear as they admitted they too could hear it, a chorus of human voices whispering together, not in sound but directly inside their skulls. The captain barked at them to control themselves, but his own hands trembled, his own breath quickened, because he too felt the ghostly presence crawling through his mind. The images shifted again, and now the crew saw great chambers within the ship, chambers filled with machines unlike anything they had ever seen. There were weapons so vast they looked like cities of steel, reactors that burned brighter than suns, engines designed to tear holes through the fabric of space. But it was not the machines that horrified them most. It was what controlled them. At the heart of each chamber they saw glowing cores, not mechanical but organic, pulsing with strange light. The ghosts of the soldiers fed into these cores, their memories, their very souls, powering the endless systems of the warship. The aliens recoiled in horror, realizing that humans had sacrificed their own minds, their own lives, binding themselves forever into their creations. The ship was not simply a machine, it was a living grave, a fusion of flesh, spirit, and steel. One officer whispered that such a thing was impossible. No race could endure such torment. No people would choose such a fate. But the captain understood. The humans had chosen it willingly. They had become part of their ships so that even in death they would fight, so that even when their bodies turned to dust, their war machines would live on, carrying their fury across the stars. The aliens realized with a sinking horror that they were not facing an empty relic. They were facing an army of ghosts, a legion of human souls bound into one monstrous vessel. As they watched, the soldiers turned their heads toward the screen, their glowing eyes piercing through the veil of time and space. The crew staggered back, some falling to the floor, their hearts pounding with terror. It felt as though the soldiers were staring directly into their souls, judging them, weighing them, deciding whether they deserved to live or die. The voices in their heads grew louder, harsher, more insistent. Words began to form, words that shook them to their core. Intruders, thieves, prey. The captain gritted his teeth, trying to resist the pull, but his vision blurred, his ears rang, and he felt as if the weight of all human history was pressing down upon him. The screens flashed again, showing battle after battle, fleets consumed, worlds shattered, civilizations erased. Each time the ghosts of the warship stood victorious, their red eyes shining with endless rage. The aliens cried out in despair, covering their ears, covering their eyes, but the images would not stop, the voices would not fade. It was as if the warship wanted them to understand, to feel, to suffer the full truth of what humanity had been. And then the screen went black. The voices fell silent. For a moment the crew felt relief, but it was short-lived. Slowly, one by one, the lights on their ship began to flicker, not with their own glow, but with the same red light of the warship. The consoles lit up, their symbols changing into human letters, their systems speaking in human code. The alien ship was being rewritten, remade, claimed by the ghosts in the machine. The crew screamed in panic, rushing to the controls, but it was too late. Their vessel was no longer theirs. It now belonged to the warship. The captain fell to his knees, his pride finally shattered as he realized the truth. The ghosts of humanity were not only inside their ship, they were spreading, infecting, consuming, taking everything they touched. And now, they were inside his ship, inside his crew, inside his mind. The final image appeared on their main screen, a single phrase written in burning letters, a message from the human warship that sealed their fate. You are part of us now. The alien crew sat in terror as the words, "You are part of us now," burned on their main screen, glowing like fire in the darkness of space, and though no sound followed the message, the silence that filled their ship was heavier than any explosion. The captain gripped the railing tightly, his claws digging into the metal, his mind torn between rage and despair. His pride screamed that he could not allow his ship, his crew, his honor to be taken by a human ghost, but his heart whispered the truth. They were powerless. The crew looked to him for orders, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. But he could not speak. What order could he give when every system, every console, every light now pulsed with the same red glow of the human warship? Their ship no longer felt like their own. It felt invaded, possessed, alive with something alien yet terrifyingly human. The silence stretched on, endless and suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of their engines, though even that sound seemed unnatural, as if the warship itself controlled it. Then the lights dimmed further, and the crew gasped as the warship outside shifted, its enormous cannons slowly turning, aligning with surgical precision until their barrels aimed directly at the alien ship. The crew froze. No shots were fired, no weapons discharged, but the threat was clear, louder than any voice could ever be. The ship did not need to fire to terrify them. Its silence was a weapon, its stillness, a scream. The youngest alien officer trembled, his voice breaking as he whispered that the warship was playing with them, testing them like prey before the kill. The captain snapped at him to be silent, but his own shaking hands betrayed his fear. Every instinct told them to run, yet their ship would not obey. The warship held them firmly, not with chains, not with weapons, but with invisible power that bent their systems, their will, their very sense of control. One officer tried to override the engines manually, slamming his hands against the console, but the screen only flashed a single word in glowing red letters: denied. Another officer attempted to power their shields, but the same message appeared: denied. Their ship belonged to the Ghost now. The crew began to whisper among themselves, voices rising with panic, some begging to surrender, others demanding to fight, though they knew weapons would be useless against such a monster. The captain tried to calm them, roaring that they would not break, that their empire would never bow to the ghosts of humanity. But his words rang hollow. Even he could not believe them. As they argued, the warship sent another wave of visions. This time there were no battles, no burning worlds. Instead they saw silence, vast stretches of space where stars had gone dark, systems where life no longer existed, whole regions of the galaxy empty, lifeless, as if erased by time itself. The crew shivered as they realized these were not just empty places. These were scars. Wounds carved into the universe by the very ship that now aimed its cannons at them. The warship was showing them not what it could do, but what it had already done. The youngest alien broke into tears, his voice shaking as he asked why humans had needed such power, why they had created ships that destroyed not only enemies, but hope itself. Nobody answered because nobody dared to. The silence of the warship spoke louder than their voices ever could. Then, slowly, the red lights on the warship's surface began to pulse, faster and faster, until they beat like a heart. The alien crew stared, dread filling their chests, as if each pulse was counting down to their end. But no attack came. The cannons stayed silent, the warship unmoving. The silence was worse than any strike. It stretched across every second, every breath, gnawing at their sanity. The crew began to whisper again, their fear turning to madness. Some said the warship was waiting for them to make a mistake. Others claimed it was deciding which of them to kill first. The captain ordered them to remain silent, but even his voice cracked under the weight of the tension. Then came the whispers, not from the crew, but from the ship itself. Faint, soft, inside their minds. They were not words at first, just sounds, echoes of human voices murmuring in the dark, but slowly they grew clearer until every alien heard them plainly. "We are watching." The crew stiffened, their eyes darting around the room, but the voices came from nowhere and everywhere at once, louder now. "We are waiting." The youngest officer clutched his head, screaming that he could not bear it, that the ghosts were inside his mind, clawing at his thoughts. Others joined him, crying out in fear, their hands pressed against their skulls as if they could push the voices out. The captain roared for silence, his pride pushing back against the terror, but he too could feel the whispers slithering through his mind, cold and merciless. The voices fell silent again, leaving the crew gasping for air, their bodies trembling, their hearts pounding. And then, as if to remind them of their helplessness, the warship shifted once more. Its cannons powered up, glowing faintly, humming with energy, yet still it did not fire. The aliens stared in horror, their minds breaking under the silent threat. They realized the warship was toying with them, letting fear do the killing instead of weapons. The youngest alien collapsed to the floor, sobbing that death would be better than this silence, better than this waiting. The captain felt despair wash over him, heavier than any burden he had ever carried. He understood now that the warship did not need to destroy them. It was already destroying them from within. Fear was the weapon, silence was the attack, and their own minds were the battlefield. As the cannons of the warship held steady, as the red lights pulsed in the void, as the silence wrapped around them like a shroud, the captain finally admitted the truth. They were already defeated. The alien crew sat frozen in the suffocating silence as the massive human warship loomed before them, its cannons still aimed directly at their fragile vessel, its red lights pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. They had seen visions of battles. They had heard the voices of human ghosts. They had felt their minds invaded, but nothing compared to what happened next. Without warning, the entire warship began to tremble, a low vibration spreading through the void like distant thunder. The aliens gasped as new lights flickered across its surface, lines of glowing red symbols stretching along its armored hull, forming patterns that looked almost alive. One officer whispered that it was waking up, and though the words were soft, every crew member heard them, and terror filled their hearts. The captain's throat went dry as he stared at the sight, unable to deny the truth. Until now, the warship had been half asleep, half dead, half alive. But now it was rising, shaking off the shadows of time, preparing to return to full power. Their consoles lit up with blinding data streams, symbols they could not read, warnings they could not understand, but the meaning was clear. Something massive was happening inside the human ship. The hum grew louder, shaking their bones, rattling their teeth, until it became a roar that filled the silence of space itself. Then, in one terrifying instant, the warship's weapons came online. Gigantic cannons, silent until now, lit up with red fire, energy pulsing along their barrels like rivers of molten blood. Missile bays opened, revealing endless rows of death machines waiting to be unleashed. Plasma vents glowed, shining with a light hotter than suns. The crew screamed in horror, some falling to their knees, others clinging to their stations as if that could save them. Their eyes wide with despair. They had never seen such power, not even in the grand fleets of their empire. This was not a warship. This was a god of war. The youngest alien cried out that they were doomed, that no shield, no fleet, no world could survive what they now faced. The captain tried to roar for silence, but his voice cracked with fear, his body shaking as he watched the impossible sight. And then, just as suddenly as the weapons came alive, the warship stilled. The cannons held their aim, glowing with power, but not firing. The silence returned. But this silence was worse than before because now they knew the truth. The warship had awakened, and it was holding back, choosing not to kill them yet. The crew sat in the dim glow of their failing lights, their minds, breaking under the weight of the moment. Why was it waiting? Why had it not destroyed them instantly? The answer came when their screens lit up again, and for the first time, the crew saw a figure. A hologram flickered before them, tall and shadowed, armored in black steel, a human commander. His face was stern, his eyes cold, and though centuries had passed since humans had vanished, his presence was alive, powerful, commanding. He did not speak at first. He only stared at them, his gaze piercing, crushing, as if he could see every thought, every fear, every weakness inside them. The youngest alien sobbed, turning away from the sight, but the others could not look away. The captain forced himself to stand tall even as his body shook, even as sweat ran down his face. Finally, the hologram spoke. The voice was human, deep and filled with iron, and it shook the chamber like thunder. "You were warned," the commander said. His words were simple, but their weight was unbearable. The crew trembled, their hearts pounding, their minds screaming. The commander raised a hand, and behind him, the vision of the warship's weapons grew brighter, as if his will alone could summon their fury. "We do not forgive," he continued, his tone calm, cold, merciless. We do not forget. We endure. The captain fell silent, his pride shattered, for he knew now that he was standing before something greater than himself, something greater than his empire, something greater than all the stars combined. The hologram leaned closer, his eyes burning with the same red fire as the warship itself. "You looked inside," he said. "Now you cannot leave." The crew cried out in despair, some begging for mercy, others falling to the floor in worship, their minds unable to hold the weight of such power. The captain clenched his fists, rage and fear battling inside him, but deep down he knew resistance was meaningless. This ship, this ghost, this commander, they were unstoppable. The warship had awakened fully, and it was alive, not only with steel and fire, but with the souls of humanity itself. The lights in the alien vessel flickered once more, their systems humming with the same red glow, their controls rewriting themselves into human symbols. The crew watched helplessly as their own ship was absorbed piece by piece, consumed by the will of the awakened warship. The youngest alien screamed that they were being erased, that their ship was no longer theirs, but nobody could answer him. Their eyes remained locked on the hologram, on the cold human commander who stood like a shadow of death before them. Then the hologram spoke again, softer now but sharper than any blade. "You are witnesses," he said. "You will carry the memory, and through you, others will fear." The crew gasped as the meaning struck them. The warship was not going to kill them, at least not yet. It wanted them to live in terror, to spread the story of what they had seen, to carry the legend of the humans into the stars once more. But as hope flickered in their hearts, it was crushed instantly. For the commander's eyes burned brighter, and his voice thundered once more. "But not all of you." The warship's weapons shifted, glowing with fire, humming with deadly energy, and the crew realized their fate was sealed. Some of them would die, sacrificed to the silence, a lesson to the stars. Others might live, but they would never be free. They would never escape the gaze of the awakened human warship. The silence stretched on, endless, heavy, unbearable, and, in that silence, the aliens realized the truth. They were no longer explorers, no longer soldiers, no longer proud servants of their empire. They were prey, and the predator had awakened. The alien crew sat in silence, staring at the burning eyes of the human commander's hologram, as the red glow of the awakened warship filled every corner of their vessel. And though none of them dared to move, they all felt the crushing weight of his presence pressing into their bones, squeezing the air from their lungs, drowning them in fear. The commander's voice echoed again, each word sharp as steel and heavy as stone. "You will carry our memory," he said, his tone calm but merciless. "You will speak of what you saw, and when your people hear, they will tremble." His eyes moved slowly across the crew, staring at each one as though reading their souls, and none of them could look away. The youngest alien trembled violently, his body shaking with sobs, while the captain clenched his fists, his pride bleeding. Away with every second under that gaze. Suddenly the hologram faded, replaced by the image of the warship itself, its cannons glowing brighter, humming with deadly power. The aliens screamed, thinking the end had come, but the ship did not fire. Instead, their main screen lit up with new symbols, red human letters forming into words they could not understand. Yet their minds twisted with pain, as if the meaning was burned directly into their thoughts. The youngest alien cried out, clutching his head, shouting that the words were inside his mind, echoing, endless, unshakable. Others followed, screaming and falling to the floor, their hands pressed against their skulls as the message carved itself into their memories. The captain roared for them to endure, his own head throbbing with unbearable fire, but he too staggered, nearly collapsing under the assault. The message was not just sound, not just sight. It was force, energy, a weapon of memory itself. When the pain finally faded, the crew gasped for air, their bodies weak, their minds trembling. And then, in one voice, they all spoke the words at the same time, their voices trembling, hollow, lifeless. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure. The captain's heart froze as he realized the warship had planted the words inside. Them carved them into their thoughts so deeply that they could never be removed. Even if they wanted to forget, even if they begged to erase it, the memory would remain. It was no longer just a message. It was a curse. The hologram returned. The human commander standing tall, silent, his eyes burning with cold fire. He raised a hand and pointed at the crew, and his voice thundered again. Now you are ours. The crew trembled, for though the warship had not destroyed them, they knew now that they would never escape it. They had been marked, chosen, chained to the memory of the humans and their endless wrath. The youngest alien begged for mercy, his voice breaking as he crawled on the floor, but the commander did not answer. Instead, the warship's cannons shifted again, locking onto their vessel, and a single beam of red light cut across the void, striking a nearby asteroid. The rock exploded instantly, shattered into dust, vanishing in a burst of fire brighter than a sun. The crew screamed in horror, their hearts stopping as they imagined their ship in place of the rock, and the captain realized the message was clear. The warship was showing them a taste of its power, a reminder that their lives could end in a single breath if the humans willed it. Silence followed, long and endless, and the crew sat trembling, waiting for the next move. Then the commander spoke once more. "You will return," he said. "You will speak of this, and your people will learn what it means to fear." His voice faded, and the hologram vanished, but the warship itself did not disappear. It lingered, massive and silent, its cannons still aimed, its red glow pulsing like the heart of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The alien crew sat broken, their spirits crushed, their pride shattered. The captain struggled to stand, his body weak, his eyes hollow, but he forced himself to speak. "We survive," he whispered, though even he did not believe the words. The youngest alien asked through tears why the humans had returned, why they haunted the stars, why their ghosts could not rest. But no one answered. They all knew the truth deep inside. The humans had never left. Their warship had waited, silent in the dark, patient beyond reason, ready for the moment when someone would awaken it again. And now, the aliens were the messengers of that nightmare. Their ship systems flickered as control slowly returned, though the human symbols remained carved into their consoles, glowing faintly, a constant reminder of who truly owned them. The captain ordered the engines to be engaged, but his voice shook as he gave the command, for he knew they were not leaving by their own will. They were being allowed to leave, spared not by mercy, but by design. The warship wanted them alive, not for kindness, but for fear. The engines roared to life, and their ship slowly pulled away, every alien holding their breath as the distance grew between them and the monstrous warship. Yet even as the stars shifted outside, none of them felt free. The youngest alien sobbed, whispering that the warship would follow them, that it would never let them go, and in his heart, the captain knew he was right. The warship's silence was more terrifying than any pursuit, because they knew it could appear again at any moment, anywhere, without warning. The crew sat broken, their eyes empty, their thoughts chained to the memory of the human words carved into their souls. "We do not forgive, we do not forget, we endure." The silence filled the ship, heavy and endless, and though they drifted away into the stars, they carried with them the message of fear, a message that would spread like fire through their empire, a message that would shatter hope, a message that would remind all who heard it that humanity had not died, that humanity had not faded, that humanity endured, silent and waiting in the dark. The alien ship drifted through the endless void, its engines burning weakly as though even the machinery had been drained of courage, and though distance grew between them and the human warship, the crew felt no relief, for its shadow lingered. In their minds, heavy and unshakable, like chains that stretched across the stars. None of them spoke for a long time, their voices trapped in their throats, their thoughts poisoned by the words burned into their memory. The youngest alien sat curled in his chair, his eyes wide and glassy, whispering over and over the human message as if repeating it might keep the pain away, but instead it only spread the dread deeper. The captain sat rigid in his seat, staring at the stars ahead, though he did not see them, for all he could see was the burning red gaze of the human commander, carved forever into his mind. His crew waited for him to speak, to lead, but his silence told them the truth. He had no plan, no answers, no escape. Hours passed, though to the crew it felt like centuries, until at last their navigation console blinked with familiar coordinates. Their home system, their empire. The captain gave the order to proceed, but his voice was hollow, empty of pride, and the crew obeyed in silence. As their ship slipped into the borders of their empire, stations hailed them, asking for status, asking why their journey had been so long delayed. But the captain silenced all communications, his heart heavy with the weight of what must be spoken. When their vessel finally docked, the crew walked down the ramp like shadows of themselves, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, their bodies trembling as if they had left pieces of their souls behind in the dark. Waiting for them were officers of the Empire, tall and proud, demanding answers, demanding reports. But when they looked into the eyes of the crew, they fell silent, for they saw fear unlike any they had ever witnessed before. The captain was taken before the council, the highest rulers of their people, and though he had faced them many times before with confidence and pride, this time he bowed his head, his body heavy with shame and terror. The council demanded to know what had happened, what enemy they had encountered, and why their ship returned scarred and broken. For a moment the captain tried to remain silent, tried to bury the truth, but the words burned inside him, unstoppable, unshakable, and finally they burst from his lips. "We found a human warship," he said, his voice shaking. The chamber erupted in confusion and disbelief, laughter and denial, for the humans were myth, a race long vanished, a story told to frighten children. But the captain's eyes silenced them, his trembling body, his hollow gaze, his broken voice. "They are not gone," he whispered. "They endure." The council demanded details, and the captain told them everything, his words spilling like poison, his voice heavy with the memory of the human commander's cold gaze. The counselors shifted uneasily, their proud faces twisting with discomfort, for though they wanted to deny his tale, they too felt the weight of his words pressing against their chests. Some laughed nervously, saying the crew had been tricked by an abandoned machine. Some whispered that it was a curse from the stars, but all fell silent when the captain repeated the words carved into his soul, the words that echoed through his crew. "We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure." The council chamber fell silent as the echoes filled the air, and for the first time in generations, the rulers of the empire felt fear. The youngest alien from the crew, dragged before them, began to scream the words over and over, his mind shattered by the message, his body trembling violently as guards tried to restrain him. The council watched in horror as he collapsed, convulsing, whispering the words even as foam touched his lips. The room reeked of terror now, the shadows deepening, the air heavy with the weight of the truth. The humans had left a mark on their people, a mark that could never be erased. The council demanded to know what the warship wanted, if it would attack, if the humans were rising again, but the captain shook his head slowly, his eyes filled with despair. "They wanted us to return," he said. They wanted us to speak. They wanted you to fear. At that moment, the lights in the chamber flickered, and though no human ship appeared, the consoles of their empire's capital lit with strange red symbols, the same symbols the crew had seen carved into their vessel. The council panicked, guards shouted, alarms blared, but nothing could stop it. The message scrawled itself across their systems, across their walls, across their minds. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure. The entire capital shook with dread as the message burned through every screen, every voice system. Every ship docked in orbit. The humans had followed them, not with ships, not with fleets, but with fear itself, a fear so deep that it spread like a plague. Panic filled the city. Whispers spreading through the streets that the humans had returned, that death was coming, that no world was safe. The council shouted for silence, ordering their people to resist the fear. But their own eyes betrayed them. Their own hands trembled as they tried to cling to pride. The captain stood silent, watching the collapse of their strength, and he knew the warship had won. It had not fired, it had not destroyed, but it had planted a terror so deep that it would break their empire from within. The youngest alien, still trembling on the floor, raised his head one last time and whispered with a broken smile, "They will come for us all." His voice cracked, his body went limp, and silence fell across the chamber. The council sat frozen, their pride shattered, their empire already crumbling under the weight of a shadow that needed no armies. The warship had given them a gift more deadly than any weapon, fear that would never fade. The Empire had always been proud, its fleets stretching across countless stars, its banners raised high over conquered worlds, its voice loud in every corner of the galaxy. But after the captain's return and the cursed message of the humans, something unseen began to spread, something far more dangerous than any fleet or weapon, and that was fear. For fear has no walls, no limits, no boundaries. And soon the whispers of the warship reached places the council could not silence. It began with the crew, their haunted eyes infecting everyone who looked upon them, their trembling voices repeating the human words, and then it moved to the guards who had heard the screams in the council chamber, then to the families of those guards, then to the markets and the streets, until finally entire cities murmured of the humans and every whisper grew darker than the last. The message became a ghost, a shadow moving faster than light, carried not by ships or signals, but by the terror inside minds. In the far colonies, where the Empire's hand was weaker, fear turned to panic, and panic turned to rebellion. For the people asked why their rulers had awakened the humans, why they had not destroyed the warship, why they claimed power yet could not protect their own. On mining stations, workers refused to enter the dark tunnels, whispering that the humans waited there, patient and silent. On agricultural worlds, entire villages burned their crops and fled into the forests, screaming that the warship would come from the sky. Even in the capital, the heart of the empire, where the council tried to project strength, the message appeared again and again, burned into systems, etched into walls, carved into dreams. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure. The council called it an infection, a trick, a weakness of the mind. But even they felt it gnawing inside. Even they saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. Even they woke from sleep, with cold sweat, hearing the human voice whispering in their ears. The captain, broken and silent, was dragged before the council again, accused of treason, accused of spreading lies, but when they demanded he deny the humans, he only lowered his eyes and whispered, "You cannot deny what already lives inside. You." His words sent shivers through the chamber, and though they wanted to execute him, to silence him, they did not, for deep inside they feared his death might only make the message stronger. Across the empire, commanders tried to rally their fleets, but their soldiers were shaken, their pilots trembling in their seats, their hands refusing to fire upon drills, for every target reminded them of the asteroid shattered by the warship's cannon, and in their hearts they knew no weapon of theirs could match such power. Entire squadrons deserted, abandoning their posts, fleeing into the black void, whispering that at least in the dark they could hide from the humans. Traders spread rumors in every port, saying they had seen red lights in the stars, saying they had heard voices whispering in their ships, and even those who did not believe the tales could not help but feel a chill in their bones. The Empire's allies began to withdraw, their treaties broken, their voices cold, for none wished to stand near those who had awakened the humans. None wished to be the next target of their endless wrath. The Council tried to call for unity, sending out messages that the humans were only myth, only trickery. But each time they spoke, their words were drowned by the echo that burned into every mind, the same words again and again. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure. Soon children in schools whispered it, carving the words into their desks, chanting them in the dark, too young to understand but old enough to fear, and their parents wept, unable to stop the infection. Priests in temples declared the humans were gods of vengeance, eternal and unshakable, punishing those who dared challenge them, and entire congregations fell to their knees, begging for mercy that would never come. On distant worlds, desperate leaders ordered their skies to be scanned for red light, and when none was found, they breathed relief for only a moment before remembering that the humans did not need to be seen to be feared. Every night across the Empire, dreams were filled with the burning eyes of the human commander, his voice whispering, his hand pointing, his shadow covering the stars. Entire cities woke screaming, their people unwilling to return to sleep, their bodies weak from exhaustion, their spirits breaking. The Empire's once proud strength turned to cracks, and the cracks turned to fractures, and the fractures spread, until even the Council could not deny the truth. The humans had destroyed nothing, yet they had broken everything. The youngest alien who had survived the warship's curse lay in a medical chamber, his body weak, his mind shattered, and yet, even as machines tried to heal him, he whispered the words without end, smiling through tears, whispering them as if they were his only breath. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure. His voice spread through the corridors, haunting doctors, frightening guards, and soon even they began to repeat it, not by choice but by force. For the words had become more than sound. They had become a sickness of the soul. The Empire stood on the edge of collapse, and yet the humans had not fired a single shot. They had planted only one seed, and that seed had grown into a forest of fear that choked the stars. The captain, locked in his quarters, gazed out at the night, and though he saw only stars, in his heart he knew the warship was still there, watching, waiting, patient as always. The humans had no need to move. They had no need to strike. The Empire was already destroying itself, and the warship was feeding on the silence. The Empire had once stood as a giant among the stars, its fleets unmatched, its banners stretching across galaxies, its rulers arrogant in their power. But all giants fall not when their bodies are crushed, but when their hearts are broken, and now the Empire's heart beat weakly, poisoned by fear, consumed by whispers of humans who had not fired, not moved, not struck, and yet had become stronger than any army. On the council floor, the rulers argued endlessly, their voices sharp and desperate, some demanding war, some demanding surrender, some begging for silence. But their words carried no strength, for even they trembled, their eyes haunted by the memory of the warship's red glare. In the streets below, the people no longer worked, no longer built, no longer obeyed, for they were too afraid to move forward, too certain that every breath might be their last before the humans returned. Markets closed, ships stayed docked, factories fell silent, and whispers filled every corner, whispers of doom, whispers of vengeance, whispers that the humans were already among them. Rebellions flared on the edges of the Empire, fueled not by strength, but by panic, and when soldiers were sent to crush them, they refused to fight, throwing down their weapons, crying out that no enemy mattered, not when the humans endured. Colonies cut ties, stations declared independence, entire fleets vanished into the void, and the empire that once united countless worlds began to shatter like glass struck by a hammer. The captain who had seen the warship sat in a dark cell, staring at the walls, whispering the message to himself again and again, and though the council had ordered him silenced, they had not killed him, for they feared his death would make him a martyr, a prophet of human vengeance. And so he lived on, broken but dangerous, a living reminder of their failure. His crew scattered, some hiding in corners of the galaxy, some falling into madness, some spreading the curse with every word. They spoke, and wherever they went, the message followed, like a plague that could not be stopped. Priests declared the end of days, claiming the humans were eternal judges, sent by the stars to punish the empire for its arrogance, and entire populations abandoned their cities, fleeing into caves, forests, and wastelands, praying for safety. That never came. The Empire's enemies, watching from afar, grew bold, sending raiders to strike, but even they whispered of the humans. Even they trembled when they saw red lights in the sky, unsure if they belonged to ships or shadows. The Council, desperate to regain control, built great fleets, pouring their resources into weapons and machines, declaring to the people that they would face the humans, that they would not kneel, but the people no longer believed. And when the fleets launched, their soldiers looked at one another with hollow eyes, knowing deep down that their weapons meant nothing. And then one night, across every system of the Empire, the lights flickered, screens burned red, and the message returned again, not whispered this time, not hidden, but roaring through every speaker, every console, every ship, every station. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure. The sound shook worlds, rattled stars, froze blood in every vein, and for a single terrifying moment, the entire empire felt the weight of human eyes upon them. Panic erupted. Fleets turned against each other in confusion, cities burned, and the council chambers themselves filled with chaos as rulers screamed and fled, tearing off their symbols of power, their pride shattered. No human ship appeared. No cannon fired, no invasion swept through, but the empire collapsed all the same, undone not by battle, but by terror, by a shadow that could not be killed. Planets severed their ties, declaring themselves free, and in their fear, they destroyed their own communication networks, hoping that silence would protect them, but silence only fed the dread. Stations turned on their neighbors, hunting for spies, for traitors, for human influence, and in their madness, they killed one another, destroying what unity remained. In the void, countless vessels drifted abandoned, their crews lost to despair, their hulls scarred not by weapons but by neglect, for no one dared venture into the black any longer, no one dared tempt the gaze of the humans. And somewhere, far beyond the chaos, in the silent emptiness of space, the warship waited, its red eyes glowing, its cannons cold, its silence louder than any voice, for it knew time was its ally, fear its weapon, patience its victory. The humans had not needed armies, they had not needed fleets, they had not needed wars, for their vengeance was deeper, older, sharper than steel, and the empire had destroyed itself with its own fear of them. The captain in his cell laughed softly, a hollow laugh that echoed in the dark, for he understood now, he understood what the humans had meant all along, that survival was not about strength, not about numbers, but about endurance, about waiting while others burned themselves to ash. They endure, he whispered, his voice soft, almost reverent, as the empire crumbled outside his walls. Planets burned, rulers fell, fleets vanished, and in the silence that followed, the galaxy shivered, for all who watched knew the truth. The empire was gone, but the humans remained, unseen yet eternal, patient yet unstoppable, waiting in the shadows for the next who dared to awaken them. And so across the stars, even as new powers rose, even as survivors tried to build again, the words lingered, carved into the memory of every living being, a curse that would never fade, a warning that would never die. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We endure.